Hello everyone, Zellerant here, and we're starting to see all the little bit of information on Meech Tea coming out. Now this is stuff we've already known because I've already talked about her, we've already looked over her kit and that. So we're going to kind of see that standard stuff for the patch with Meech Tea, her skills, and then all the stuff coming out with that her second half of the event. We already kind of know all that stuff, but today I kind of wanted to talk about whether or not should you pull over Meech Tea, because I think she's one that is going to take a lot of thought on people and whether or not they want to pull for her. I think she's one of those characters that is absolutely great, but I think she's very easy to skip as well, even if it's a skip for now. And there's a lot of scenarios you can be in, and it's going to be, it is one of those tougher decisions depending on your investment, like in Clukai and all that. And so that's what I kind of wanted to discuss here. But I think all decisions regarding her, like I think you can't go wrong in pulling her, and I think you can't go wrong in skipping her, regardless of the status of your account. I think she's right now in that kind of a scenario, and we'll kind of go through it here. The biggest thing that we know of, though, when it comes to whether or not you skip as well, is the upcoming units after her, which is going to be Vector, Jahoy, and Yuhi. Depending on your needs on those characters will also potentially determine whether or not you're going to pull for her as well, but we'll kind of get into them here in a second. Now, there's three main scenarios that you're going to have to think about when it comes to pulling ver that you could be in. You either don't have a Clukai, that's the first scenario. You have a Clukai, but she's only V0, that's the second scenario. And you have Clukai and you have her V3 or V6. Those are basically the three scenarios that you can be into that can kind of make your determining factor of whether or not you want to pull ver Meech Tea. Now, the big thing that what she brings is she brings a lot of bonuses to damage and stuff, to corrosion. If you're V0 Clukai, for example, you can also add that defensive reduction to defense, since your Clukai is not going to be able to add V3 or V2 or lower. She's not going to be able to apply that herself, and so Meech Tea can bring that in her on one of her fixed keys for your team. And then she has all the other little buffs that she has as well. Now, one assumption I'm going to make is that everyone has a Peridia at this point. If you don't have a Peridia, there is the option of you can go specifically targeting her on the standard banner. So I'm taking that into consideration. That's one big thing with Meech Tea, is she pairs extremely well with Peridia as well in your Clukai team. So we're just going on that assumption that you have her, even if you haven't gotten her yet, because she is somebody that you can get quite easily if you put your standard pulls towards her. Now, the first scenario is going to be you do not have Clukai. If you're one of those people who decided to skip Clukai, is it worth it at all to pull for Meech Tea? And for most people, I'm going to say you do not need to pull her. But there is the one scenario, and this is something I've seen someone mention before, is you don't have Clukai, but Meech Tea can still be extremely useful if you care about doing well in the platoon battles. And that's the case if you have somebody, which I think I've seen from a lot of, if you're in one of those more active platoons, like from a lot what I've seen, most of them have at least one person in the platoon, like within the top 100, have somebody that has a V6 Clukai. And if somebody in your platoon has a V6 Clukai and you get a Meech Tea, that gives you the ability to pair your Meech Tea with that borrowed V6 Clukai. And so Meech Tea is going to serve a very good purpose with that, in that you can provide that extra buffs and stuff for her within platoon boss battles. Now, that is, and that's kind of that one scenario you're going to have with Meech Tea there, is that, and she's not really going to provide more value outside of that, other than maybe a little bit of defensive debuffs and stuff if you want to utilize her within other teams that she's not as synergetic with. But she's going to be great for you to pair with when you borrow a Clukai on platoon boss battles. But it's really going to depend on how many pulls you have. That is I have plenty of pulls, and I'm not too worried about future characters like Vector and Yuhi, like any of those big ones that you feel like you must have, especially like Vector if you're wanting to get the V1. Then that is a good scenario to pull her. But if you don't have Clukai, ultimately she is easy to skip. Now I'm going to tell everybody I think she's going to have a lot of future value because of her ability to change AoE support actions, but that has yet to be seen on the CN side. And you don't want to pull based on stuff you can't see yet. And it is very specific on that. And so you can always get her on her reruns, the way I think about it. And she is going to rerun within 4 patches. So you can kind of make, if you decide to skip her at this point, you can just pull on her in 4 patches when you have more knowledge on the next 4 characters in CN as well. So that's kind of the first scenario with Clukai at V0. Ultimately, or if you don't have Clukai, ultimately, it depends on whether you want to utilize her for platoon boss battles in that scenario, and you have the pulls still to kind of get the other big characters you want, like a Vector V1. Okay, then the next scenario is going to be a Clukai V0. Now, V0 does not have that defense built into her, because that comes into play, I believe, on her V3. So when you look at Clukai's here, down at her upgrade 3, she can apply that defense down, which gets that debuff on them at V3. So one negative, well, I wouldn't call it negative, but one of the things that is kind of not as good on Meech Tea is once you get up to V3 and above on Clukai, this acid corrosion is no longer as relevant in that capacity. So you would use a different fixed key in that capacity. Like you can actually see here, they actually mention it on the chart here, that you only use it if she's V2 and below. And that is because Clukai can already provide it for herself. So you lose a little bit of value there. But now I'm talking about V0 Clukai, where you do get the advantage of having this. Now, I think that is very good, and I think that actually does make Meech Tea quite valuable to Clukai in terms of being able to do basically a defensive reduction to a lot of enemies, because there is content in this game. Even though she is very good, she's not going, you want to one-shot enemies at V0, because one-shotting multiple enemies is how you're going to be able to do 2 ultimates back-to-back, or basically do your ultimate and get that extra one. And so any extra damage you can get out of Meech Tea is definitely going to help with that. So I think Meech Tea provides her most value when you have a V0 Clukai. And then you have that ability to pair it alongside Peridia, which I think Peridia is still great within that team, even though Peridia, ultimately, I find her to be at her best when you're doing boss battles with a V3 or higher, because she does really good single target damage when you can do all those support actions. But I think this is going to definitely make it much, much easier to get those kills with Clukai to ultimately do your ultimate more often. So if you have a V0 Clukai, then I think Meech Tea is a good pickup. Now, the caveat to that is, I don't think she is like one of those, you must have her, she's going to make her so much better in that capacity. Clukai is broken on her own. You can throw her to any team. She does her AoE. And even if you're not able to do her AoE attacks back to back because you can't get the kills, that's completely fine. She's still able to do monstrous AoE damage regardless. And you can always work around it with the other team members. You can weaken the enemy so that you have at least 2 that have their health lowered. And that way, when she goes through and does her AoE ultimate, she's going to at least kill 2, and then she's going to get it that way. So you can work around not having a Meech Tea. So you don't have to feel like you need her. I think she's going to provide the most value to the V0. But Clukai is good on her own with that, especially if you're not one that wants to invest heavily into corrosion for the future. Maybe you're really going to be big into your burn, electric, and hydro teams. Then Meech Tea is just a temporary value that you can skip for now and always just wait to make your decision maybe later. So I do think she does provide the most value to your V0 though, but I think she is definitely skippable at that point if needed. And like I said right in the beginning, I mean, I think Meech Tea is kind of that scenario if she's really good, but I think everybody can skip her and not feel like they're losing out too much as well. So it is one of those kind of situations. And that kind of brings up the last one, which is going to be your V3 and V6. And V3, V6, which we already said with the defensive, Clukai can already bring in her own defense reduction here. Now, if you went for V3 or V6, I'm going to make the assumption that you're somebody that spends on this game, especially if you went for V6. I know there's some people that are lighter spenders that decided to skip a lot to make sure they could get her. Well, that's great. I'm kind of going, though, that if you're going for V6s, you're willing to put some money into the game. And that is where I think she is a great pickup at these levels. Just because if you're willing to put that kind of investment in Clukai, that means you like Clukai. You're like me. I like Clukai. I wanted to put a lot into her. I want to build a big team around her. And Meech Tea is going to be what's going to make Clukai just even that much better. Even if she doesn't feel as necessary, because you don't really need that. And she doesn't have as much else in her kit as well that's too crazy. I mean, she provides a lot of extra damage, but nothing too crazy in that capacity. And when it comes to her dupes, Meech Tea really doesn't provide anything unless you go all the way to her V6 to the team. But even then, if you're a person like me at V3 and V6 and you really like your Clukai and want to really maximize her damage, Meech Tea is a great pickup, especially alongside her weapon. Just an increase to corrosion damage dumb. Absolutely great. But like I'm saying, she is an easier skip at this one as well. Clukai is a monster, especially at V6. But even at V3, she can do everything on her own. She does not need anybody other than someone that can either do the support actions or corrosion damage, which that is basically Meech Tea there, to basically make it where she can do her ultimate back-to-back. But it is not as necessary. You can throw her in your burn team. Burn team has their support actions. We're going to see it with electric team. When we get electric, they got their support actions to be able to trigger it. So Clukai can work pretty much everywhere and doesn't need her. At that point, though, the reasoning I'd say she's a great pull is because, I mean, if you're investing in Clukai, you might as well invest your best support. So that's my thought there. Now, there is the scenario of, well, it's coming down to how many pulls you have left and the characters coming up, like I mentioned in the beginning. And the first thing is just looking at who's coming next after Meech Teas. I think what some people may want to do. So Vector V1's the biggest one I think everybody is excited for. Yuhi being the second one, and then Xiaohui, I think a majority of people, if she's going to be the easiest skip of all of them, just because she doesn't provide as much value as any of the other upcoming characters. And she's going to be utilized by many people who heavily invested in Clukai, for example, as a way to start saving up again. So one thing that could help you make that decision is don't pulver her immediately. Just wait to see who's coming up next. My best guess, and this is just guessing, I could very well be wrong. My best guess is going to be that Xiaohui is going to be the next unit after Meech Tea. And I think she's going to be a very easy skip. And based on how much pull currency we've been getting in the game, I think that would mean, hey, we're going to have enough to get pretty much the equivalent of enough to guarantee one more character after Xiaohui. So if you have, for example, 150, say, pulls saved at this point, Meech Tea is a very good one to actually pull for, because you're going to be able to save up enough for the character after Xiaohui if you're going to skip Xiaohui. And that is a great time. And then you also have the opportunity, maybe you're only willing to put, say, 70 pulls into her. Well, you can put 70 pulls into Meech Tea, and you win the 50-50, great. If you don't, well, now you have your guaranteed for the next character. And so that's kind of my thoughts on it. We do know she will be rerunning here in 4 patches, so you don't have to feel like you have to get her. And maybe you don't care about electric. And my suspicion is that electric units are going to come after the next 3. So after Vector, Xiaohui, and Yuhi, my suspicion is we're going to get the electric units all back to back to back. And maybe you don't care about electric, and that gives you the opportunity to pull her then, because you're going to have a lot to. You're going to be able to skip. So it's ultimately going to come down to your current situation and your current thought process on your main teams and future units you're wanting to pull. I just wanted to make this as a quick video to kind of give people something that they can think about. I think there's no wrong decision ultimately. Whatever you think works best for you is going to be completely fine, I think, in Meech Tea's situation, because not getting her is not like you're ruining your account. You don't have the best of the best support. Like, she's not a Springfield type character. But also getting her, if you get her, you're not going to really regret having her. She's going to be a great member on your team with your Clukai. Or even if you don't have a Clukai, you're going to be able to utilize her in platoon bosses when you borrow a V6 Clukai. So ultimately, to make the TD, I should have probably said at the beginning, TDLR, it doesn't matter too much, I think, on Meech Tea. She is just whatever you feel like, depending on your scenario. But I thought hopefully what I talked about maybe helps a little bit. If not, you can go ahead and leave a comment. I do try and answer questions as best as possible when people ask in the comments. So I can't take into consideration everybody's complete scenario here when it comes to how much pulls they have. So just go ahead and put it in the comments and I will look to respond. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you like my content, if you could like, comment, and subscribe, it really helps. And thanks for watching.